right, good evening everybody. Welcome back to Exploring the Lord of the Rings. This is session number 147 as we continue. I think it's session number 23, I want to say, on the Council of Elrond. We're doing great, making some excellent progress, I think. We've settled in at about a slide a night, which I think is a comfortable pace. Really, we don't want to rush things. Two announcements I want to make before I start class tonight. The first is it's not exactly an announcement so much as a warning. That is, of course, we haven't missed any classes in a long time because I've not been traveling anywhere ever since the pandemic thing began. And it's normally travel, which leads to my not being able to be available. However, about a few weeks from now, I'm going to have to miss at least one, possibly two, we'll see, classes in a row, and for a very good reason. We are coming up on a very, very important deadline at Signum, and I am sort of leading the team, which is compiling a very voluminous I'm writing a book, essentially, in the next, finishing my book, that is, in the next 4 weeks. Don't get too excited. It's not an exciting book. Except it is kind of an exciting book. But anyway, anyway, it's all good. The point is, I'm going to have to kind of go into retreat mode for a little bit in order to make my deadline. My deadline is the 15th of July. So definitely the second week of July, possibly the first week of July, things are going to be a little bit uncertain as far as class is concerned. So I'll keep you posted. I just wanted to give a general kind of caution about that. So just don't be too shocked. We're obviously having class this week. Next week we'll be fine as well. Probably the week after that too. But then, as I say, I'll have to miss at least one for sure, possibly two in a row. We will see what happens here as we get closer to things. So anyway, just wanted to warn you that was coming. The second announcement I wanted to make is I wanted to remind you guys about our Signum Path classes that are happening, and I wanted to make an announcement about that, about a special that we are going to be running here for July and August. It's certainly going to go through the end of this month. So you remember, Signum Path is our new program, which I'm really excited about. It's our new program for skills training, foundational skills training, all those what are often called soft skills, right? Which I was just hearing about an article earlier today, which showed that 80% of human resources folks said that they think that people really need better soft skills. It would be a huge benefit in the workplace if they had better soft skills. But only 10% of those same people actually were allocating budget money to train people in soft skills, right? That's a really interesting kind of situation, right? So the punchline of that story, it would seem to me, is that if you want to be able to improve yourself in these ways that are going to be really valuable and which everybody recognizes is super important for your career, well, it's kind of up to you, because a lot of companies just are not allocating any money for that kind of training. We have this kind of training available to the public. It's a really great opportunity. So here's what we're going to do. Signum Path is a brand new program, and we really want to encourage people to try it out. We know that our program is only gonna flourish as people discover how awesome it is. So here's what we're going to do. We are currently registering. So if you click on the register button, here's our registration page. We have these 4 different badges that we offer, and we're doing 4 classes in July and 4 classes again in August, as you can see in each of these badges. Wait, no, 1 class in each badge, 4 total classes. That's the way it works. Anyway, so if you register for a class in July, then we will let you take a class in August for free. We're going to do, for a short time, we're going to do a 2-for-1 deal on our Path classes. So here's what you do. Go to the registration page here, register for a class in July, any of the classes in July that you want, and then send us an email at path@signumu.org. And we will, and you can reserve your spot. I don't have we have a brand new registration system, and I don't have coupon code capabilities here, else I'd just give you a code. So instead, just send us an email and we'll get you plugged into your second class as well. So anyway, I wanted to let you know about this really special offer. So go to path.signumuniversity.org, which is our homepage. Check out our upcoming classes. Decide on a July class that you want to take, and then you can also take an August class for just sort of included in that as part of this introductory package. So anyway, wanted to let you guys know about that because it's a really fun opportunity. So, okay. With that said, let us go to the text. And I want to jump straight to the text today because I have a really ambitious goal. 2 slides. My goal is 2 slides tonight. I definitely want to get to the words of Isildur tonight. But before that, we have one more slide of build-up from Gandalf. So he's just finished. So said Denethor, right? Thus quoth Denethor, says Gandalf here. And we talked about his choice to make a direct quotation of Denethor, right? And the interesting significance of that. And yet there lie in his hoards many records. Remember, and what he's quoting, right? What he's pointing out is that Denethor had said that he is the master of the lore of his city, right? So said Denethor. And yet there lie in his hoards many records that few even of the lore masters now can read, for their scripts and tongues have become dark to later men. And Boromir, there lies And Boromir, there lies in Minas Tirith still, unread, I guess, by any save Saruman and myself, since the kings failed, a scroll that Isildur made himself. For Isildur did not march away straight from the war in Mordor, as some have told the tale. Some in the north, maybe, Boromir broke in. All know in Gondor that he went first to Minas Anor and dwelt a while with his nephew Meneldil, instructing him, before he committed to him the rule of the South Kingdom. In that time he planted there the last sapling of the white tree in memory of his brother. But in that time also he made this scroll, said Gandalf. And that is not remembered in Gondor, it would seem, for this scroll concerns the ring, and thus wrote Isildur therein. Okay. So, yeah, J.J. Boromir does know his lore, and yeah, okay, so Mike is pointing out that perhaps Boromir's all know in Gondor might perhaps be a little bit sweeping. Yeah, that might be a little bit of hyperbole on his part. I doubt 100% of the residents of, the citizens of Gondor know this piece of lore, but it seems commonly understood, right? And that doesn't seem very surprising. Yeah, but so Lincoln, I don't think it is that shocking that everyone in Gondor would know the details of what their city's founder did 3,000 years ago, especially since seeing that we see, as we can see, especially when we get there, right, how pivotal this moment is in Gondorian history, right, that some memory would be retained of Isildur's movements, not just because it's not just of his movements, right? I mean, like the planting of the White Tree. That's a big deal. Like, it's a really big deal in Gondor. Yeah. I don't think Eorth passes that lore around. Does Eorth know this? Does she know about what Isildur did? I don't know. I'm not sure if Eorth knows this. JJ suggests it's part of the Gondorian citizenship test, which I have no doubt. If you're applying for Gondorian citizenship, you would certainly have to know that. Yeah, good. Now, Matt points out that this passage does seem to... Remember, we were debating last week about... when Denethor's words that Gandalf was quoting, talking about the past being less dark than the future, right? And the question was what exactly he meant. What sense of dark did he mean, or possibly more than one? Dark in the sense of like evil and creepy, or dark in the sense of unknown and obscure, right? And Matt is suggesting that this passage would seem to indicate that the dark meaning is about understanding and not understanding, rather than thinking of bad times. Yes, I agree, Matt. Gandalf's transition here does suggest that, right? So said Denethor, about the past not being dark to him, and yet there lie in his hoards many records that few even of the lore masters now can read, right? So that would suggest that, he thinks the past is not dark, he thinks he knows everything about the past, but maybe actually he missed a few bits, right? I agree, that does seem to make it more likely to me. Fourth Dauntless says that Gandalf seems a bit nettled here. I agree. Now look, Gandalf sounding a bit tetchy is hardly unusual, right? It's hardly out of character for Gandalf. But I agree that I've always thought his tone in this passage was a little bit odd. Not odd. It's not exactly odd, but pointed, right? Okay, it's not odd, but it's in a way that I never really myself understood. And you can see it in two places, right? First, so said Denethor, right? Now that one never struck me quite so much, but that's because I never quite realized how snide that could potentially sound, right? But if we're right about the dark thing, then it does begin to sound a little bit snide, right? So said Denethor, right? Almost, it would be going further than he's going here to paraphrase that as so much for Denethor, right? But it kind of, has at least a little bit of that edge to it, I would say. So that's interesting, on its own. But even more importantly, and Fourth Dauntless, I wonder if this is the passage that you're talking about, but in that time also he made this scroll, is a sentence that always struck me as kind of strange, right? Yeah. Okay. So somebody was talking about hoards, and yet there lie in his hoards many records. We were talking about that also last time, right? How an archive is essentially a hoard, right? And his hoarded scrolls is what we talked about. And so Gandalf is here just alluding back to the phrase that he used before. But see, again, that's another thing that kind of makes me think that that he's being a little bit snippy in his so said Denethor comment. Let me go back to that for a second. Here's the last slide. He had said before, slightly more neutrally. Where is it? Yes. And grudgingly he permitted me to search among his hoarded scrolls and books. And we talked about how there was like just a hint of not an accusation, but of a criticism there, right? That Denethor's attitude was a little bit dragonish, right? In the lack of grace with which he, the grudgingness with which he opened up and allowed Gandalf to go to his archives. And so his using the adjective hoarded to describe his scrolls and books was not a really sharp criticism, but it's there, right? But the second time, when he repeats the word, and he doesn't just use it as an adjective, he's not just characterizing the scrolls as hoarded, right? But he instead says, and yet there lie in his hoards many records that few of the lore masters now can read. And of course, I can't help but remember the passage in The Hobbit that talks about how the dragons always knew the exact value of their hoards, but they didn't have any use for it, right? Or even know a good bit of work from a bad. And that all begins to, he seems to again, this seems to be a sharper criticism of Denethor here, right? See, he really is like a dragon. Not only is he hoarding these scrolls, but he's hoarding them away where no one else can read them, and he can't even read them, right? He's just preventing knowledge in that way. Yeah. Yeah, exactly. Mad Violinist says that this passage puts the previous one ending so said that Denethor is definitely casting serious shade. Yes, I agree. And Mad Violinist, when we get to that last paragraph, right? But in that time also he made this scroll, and that is not remembered in Gondor, it would seem, is even a more overt dig, right? Yeah. So, Sam there is asking, in his usage of hoard, can we conclude that not just anyone in Minas Tirith is allowed to read these? Well, I don't know if we can necessarily extrapolate to a general... I mean, Gandalf's main point is that he was barely allowed to read them, right? As the grudgingness of Denethor. Does that prove that he never lets any human being in? No, that doesn't necessarily prove that. There may well be Gondorian scholars who do have access to the archives, and whom Denethor does not. Doesn't necessarily prove that Denethor prevents all people from possibly benefiting from the lore of Minas Tirith. But again, it's certainly a much more pointed criticism, I would say, of Denethor's attitude than Gandalf sort of permitted himself in the previous paragraph. Yeah. Mike is saying that it seems that Gandalf is remembering how he was treated by Denethor, perhaps even more slightingly than he made explicit in this speech. He could be being kinder than he wants to be, and some of his bitterness is bleeding through. So, Mike, in other words, you're saying this is Gandalf attempting to be diplomatic and mostly succeeding but partially failing, right? The words that he is saying, or most of the words that he's saying, are carefully chosen and sort of neutral. But we can see his clear attitude. This is not Gandalf's strong suit, and he's not doing it super well. I can imagine that. Okay, let's see. Several of you are talking about the language stuff. We're not there yet. And remember, as always, it's okay if you guys want to make comments about parts of the passage that I haven't broached yet. Just remember, there's always a really strong risk that your comment is going to get washed downstream and I'll never see it. Because I can't just jump around. I'm not going to just jump around. I mean, sometimes I do, but that's not the plan. I'm not going to start off that way. I want to focus here first on Gandalf's tone, and then we'll get to his comments about the scroll in particular. Okay. So his attitude, I do think that he, nettled, to go back to your original word for it, Dauntless, seems fair. And to say that he's been then extra nettled by Boromir's interruption doesn't seem far to seek, right? And I think it's the interruption that prompts and that is not remembered in Gondor, it would seem, right? Which is a little snappish, right? Okay, Mr. Still trying to prove that the glory of Gondor has not fallen off and modern Gondorians are still on top of things, right? Okay, right? Well, sit down now. That is not remembered in Gondor, it would seem. And notice, of course, that not only does Gandalf, that comment, the that is not remembered in Gondor, it would seem, is not only a sort of snide rejoinder to Boromir's interruption, but it also alludes back to one of Boromir's earlier comments a little bit ago, right? You may remember that it was Boromir who interrupted Elrond by bursting out, "Isildur took it. That is tidings indeed," right? Betraying the fact that it is not remembered in Gondor that Isildur took the ring back after he left, right? And so Gandalf, of course, was going to reveal the fact that this scroll makes it explicitly clear that that Isildur took the ring, right? Is not quoting it, but he is alluding back, I think, to Boromir's earlier comment, because if anyone knew this scroll, if anyone in Gondor knew this scroll, if this were part of that lore that all in Gondor know, then it would not have been news to Boromir, obviously, right? But Boromir has revealed the fact that the general state of lore, right, in Gondor is totally unaware of what happened to the enemy's ring. Though again, I suggested that the way that Boromir says that, at least potentially, implies that it's been a subject of debate, right? It might possibly not only be among the wise that the enemy's ring is a great ring of long debate, right? But yeah. Okay. Good. Well, I'm way behind on you guys. Let's see. Right, not remembered or not known. We will see. Yeah, Sam Burke is wondering about Gandalf's social skills. He seems to make himself many enemies. Yeah. No, he's got some rough edges. Gandalf does. No question. Yeah. Let's see. Yeah, I agree, Flammifer. Gandalf clearly never took Signum Path. Though Dollarstruck, we can neither confirm nor deny that Saruman graduated and got some badges from Signum Path, thus improving clearly his soft skills. Now Tessa is asking a very sensible question. Does Gandalf do this on purpose, like Aragorn acts like a rascal on purpose? Well, not for the same reason, surely. I mean, that is, Aragorn acts like a rascal, which is a harder sentence to say than I would have thought it would be. Aragorn acts like a rascal because he's disguising himself, right? He doesn't want any, is Gandalf doing the same thing? Does he want people to dismiss him as a grumpy old man? I doubt it, especially in this environment. I mean, what does Gandalf have to hide at this point, right? I can imagine circumstances in which Gandalf would not want to be taken with a certain kind of seriousness, right? Or rather, let me say it another way. I can imagine Gandalf being in many circumstances where being taken with a certain kind of seriousness would be disadvantageous, right? He doesn't necessarily want to inspire like awe and wonder everywhere he goes. It's kind of hard to blend in, right? It's kind of hard to just get to know people and connect with folks if you're demanding awe and respect everywhere you go. But yeah, I don't think, so I can imagine him not being sort of on his dignity, in the way that Saruman appears to be. But yeah, his quick temper, I'm not sure if that's about disguise. I'm not really sure that that's about, him trying to blend in exactly, so much as it just seems to be part of his character, really. JJ says, if I'd lived in Middle-earth as long as Gandalf and been in constant contact with people as silly as some of his friends, I'd be pretty grumpy too. Very possibly. Very possibly. Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, good. Good. Well, so Sam is wondering if it's, how likely is it that it's part of his personality because of his association that we hear about in mostly in Unfinished Tales, his association with Nienna. There are two things that I would say about that. Two cautions I would say about that. Caution number one. Tolkien himself never fully made up his mind with whom Gandalf was associated, right? Nienna, Irmo, Manwë, right? I mean, there was at least a brief glimmer of time in which Tolkien was entertaining the possibility of having Gandalf be Manwë in disguise, like Odin, like sort of Odin-esque, essentially, right? The old man wandering the world in disguise. So even in his retconning modes after the Lord of the Rings, Tolkien didn't make a final, permanently stamped answer to the question, who is Gandalf exactly? Like, Aloran, who's this Aloran fellow and what's his background? He had a bunch of different kinds of stories that he was thinking about there. And, never... again, there's no definitive answer in that sense. So that's one caution. But of course, the other caution is that all that stuff is retconning, right? That's not, it certainly was not what he was thinking of at this time. Gandalf's personality certainly long predates even his being a Maya at all, basically. So I'd be cautious about drawing to many conclusions backwards based on that. Yeah. Karita, I'm thinking more along those lines as well, that if you take on the form of a grumpy old man, you eventually start to take on the personality of one. Remember that they are incarnate, right? That they're not just Maiar manifesting themselves, the Istari, I mean, in physical form like Maiar can do. He is incarnate in a body, and so therefore would develop a personality, which might well be different than, would not be simply an expression of his spirit, right, as it might have manifested itself back in Valinor. I can easily imagine, Aloran returning back to Valinor, at the end of the Third Age, and Nienna hanging out with him and being like, "Oh, you got a bit cranky, right, over the last 1,000 years or so." Yeah. Angrist, it's quite possible that he has a bad hip, like the rest of us. It's possible. It's very possible. I wouldn't... Now, we know that they age very slowly, but we know that they age, right? He looks older. When Frodo notices, even Frodo, who's known him less long than a lot of other people. Isn't that Aragorn saying, or Bilbo even, saying, in 70 years, actually, Gandalf, you look a little older than you used to 70 years ago. No, this is Frodo saying in 9 years, you look older than you did 9 years ago, right? So, yeah, his body changes. His body definitely ages. Yeah. Exactly, Tessa. He was going through a stressful time, and that's the point, right? And it had an impact on him, a physical impact on him, right? Definitely. Yeah, no, not trying to give Gandalf a hard time for aging. Just saying that doesn't happen with Maiar. Not in 9 years. Not in the same way. Even if they're under a substantial amount of pressure. Yeah. Yeah, good. Okay. Let's see. Yeah. Oh, good. So, thank you, Cook of Wooten Minor, for pointing out to me a comment that I missed before, that Drakon Tarakni was pointing out, that swift to anger and quick to laugh are connected traits. Yeah, they are. They are. And it is interesting. It does tell us something about both of them. If he were just a bitter, grumpy old man, that wouldn't be a good look, right? And I would think that would be a bad sign. That would be a bad look for Gandalf. But swift to anger and quick to laugh, I think there's empirical evidence to suggest that outlook is more a better outlook than say Saruman's, right? Yeah. Yeah, good. He is a bit hasty, Matt. I agree. Okay. Fourth Dauntless says, isn't that basically Tulkas? What, swift to anger and quick to laugh? Yeah. Yeah, well, I don't know that Tulkas is swift to anger. Tulkas is slow to anger, but quick to laugh. Tulkas is slow to anger, but slow to let it go. Also, once he has, but that's why he's one of the ones who's stalking around, not real happy with the parole of Melkor originally, right? Yeah, so I think that he's, but certainly the quick to laugh thing is certainly very like Tulkas. Yeah, but you're right, Zephin. Anger and laughter are certainly in that way, both associated with Tulkas in that way. Okay. But thinking about Flamfer, I saw you were talking about the question of his sort of attitude to Boromir here. I would say there are a couple things. That is, okay. I mean, let me be more specific of what I'm talking about. The question is, what is he doing with Boromir, right? Is he antagonizing Boromir? Is he going out of his way to throw shade at Boromir's father in public? 'Cause it kind of, a little bit, sounds like he's doing that. We had talked last time about the possibility that he was being diplomatic by quoting Denethor word for word, right? Well, if we're right about the tone at the top of that first paragraph, so said Denethor, and yet there lie in his hoards, that would seem to chuck the diplomacy pretty well right out the window, if that was his original goal, right? I mean, if you're going to quote him so that you don't have to be on record, say anything questionable about him, and then immediately mock what he said, yeah, exactly. Mad Violinist says, no, it was more of a set and then spike of Denethor's wisdom. Yeah, kind of sounds like that, doesn't it? Kind of sounds like all that, exactly as Drakon Tarakni says, Denethor said all that and he was wrong. Yeah, it's kind of how it ends up sounding. So no, I think I'm going to have to go against the he was being diplomatic thing. So if he's not being diplomatic, then what? Is he being aggressive against Boromir? Is he going out of his way to insult Boromir's father? Is he, Flamfer, I think it was you that were suggesting the possibility maybe that he's trying to put Boromir on guard, right? To warn him that something ain't quite right with your dad? Maybe. But I agree, Flammifer, he doesn't need to say anything about Denethor. It's quite beside the point. The whole purpose of his research trip was to say, I went to Minas Tirith, and at Minas Tirith I found this primary source, and it gives me the information that I needed, and with the information from that scroll, I can prove that this ring is Sauron's ring, right? That's what needs to happen here. Denethor is a bit part in that play at the absolute most, right? And yet he's gone out of his way to feature this, right? Wonderful question, Fourth Dauntless. Do we know when this part of the dialogue was written? Did it come after the Siege of Minas Tirith was drafted? So Fourth Dauntless is asking, essentially, did Tolkien have the full story of the madness of Denethor in mind when he wrote this, or not? Or did it predate it? I don't remember. Somebody could look that up. Somebody could look that up in The Return of the Shadow. It should be in The Return of the Shadow, I think. Any of you, especially any of you who did the Return of the Shadow discussion with me in the Mythgard Academy, might be able to find it. Yeah. Let me see. If I had to guess, I mean, not just totally guessing out of the dark, but if I had to guess, I think it's I don't think there's anything in here that couldn't have been written beforehand. Yeah, I wouldn't think so. So I would suspect that it would be earlier, not later. But but as I say, I don't remember. Yeah. So interesting. Now, Wolfhound there points out that the narrator implies that Boromir is being rude, right? By using the verb broke in to describe what Boromir is doing. Some in the north, maybe. Boromir broke in. And there's no question that Boromir certainly sounds nettled. And yes, nettled in a similar direction to how he was nettled before. That is about the glory of Gondor waning and all that kind of thing, right? And so here he immediately jumps in to point out, as I already said, that, Loren Gondor has not totally waned. But yet, I mean, he's responding to some, fairly serious shade that was cast on his dad. So I agree, Mark, nobody could blame him for being upset about that. Though, it's interesting that Boromir doesn't challenge it, doesn't say anything about it. I don't know. He's not going to call Gandalf out. He's not going to challenge him to a duel or something like that. Demand an apology and ask him to retract his sarcastic comments about his dad. I don't see Boromir doing that here. Okay. Great, JJ, thank you for looking that up. JJ says he's not seeing anything about Denethor in the council drafts in The Return of the Shadow. So just as he adds the reference to the brother later on, after Faramir's invented, which he wasn't originally, that he would have come back and added the stuff about Denethor later on too. That doesn't surprise me. That doesn't surprise me. I'd be interested, JJ, I can't, my book's over there. I can't look it up just now. But seeing the analog passage, the introduction, what introduction does Isildur's passage get? Yeah. Anyway, okay. So, does Boromir have a reason, or is he just being undiplomatic? The reason I was asking about his reason is not because I think that necessarily Gandalf, like every word of Gandalf, is carefully chosen in order to elicit a particular effect for a particular cause, that he's trying to manipulate people into particular reactions. Nothing like that, I wouldn't think at all. But the reason I ask the why question is that it's so unnecessary. He doesn't have to talk about Denethor at all. Right? At all. And yet, he goes out of his way to bring him up. Right? Gandalf does. Yeah. It does, I agree with you, Arden Cran, it does make it a little bit more realistically tetchy, right? That a council like this would get kind of spicy, at certain moments, right? There would be some emotions would run high at various points. That's yeah, I think that's very possible. Interesting. Fourth Dauntless says, we know that Gandalf's going to end his tale talking about Saruman. Could be he's already thinking about it and he's just irritated. Yeah, it's possible. It's possible. And, of course, several people are pointing out that, remember, no one has had lunch yet. So that also might be sufficient explanation by itself. Agreed. This, I think, perhaps is a downside to having councils like this hosted by elves who thrive on speech alone, according to Bilbo. So, yeah. Right, Sam says, nor will they for several months. Only too true, I fear. Only too true. Now, Angrist points out that he could also be irritated by the fact that the test for the ring has been known for an age and forgotten. That's possible. But, I gotta think that Gandalf's reaction to that fact would be relief, frankly. I don't think he would want more people to know. I doubt he would want information about Isildur's relationship with the Ring of Power to be part of the Gondorian citizenship test. It's enough for them to know that he stayed and instructed his nephew Meneldil. That's really probably good enough. Yeah. I'm not sure that he would want that knowledge in general population. You're right, Wolfhound. It's true that everybody thinks the ring is long lost. Well, no, hang on. The Council of the Wise believes that because Saruman has assured them that it is so, that he has authoritative knowledge, that that's the case. That's not necessarily word on the street. Word on the street is what? Ring? Huh? What? The word on the street is, huh? Nobody knows about it. It's there are some stories which might include the fact that a Ring of Power existed, but most people don't know about it. Yeah. Now, Fourth Dauntless, you're asking me the question is making me forget what Boromir said. Did Boromir think that it was destroyed? I remember him being surprised. Somebody quote me that passage again. Pretty sure. It'd take me a while to dig through my slides on the here to find it among our old slides. Right, he just bursts out, Isildur took it, that is tidings indeed. Yeah. One possible reading of that phrase is, we thought he destroyed it. Right. The other, but there are other possible theories, right? It wouldn't be strange for them to think that Elrond took it, right? That the elves took custody of it, right? That's pretty natural. Yeah. Anyway, okay. But let's loop back and talk about the language of the scroll there. Many records that few even of the lore masters now can read, for their scripts and tongues have become dark to later men. And Boromir there lies in Minas Tirith, still unread, I guess, by any save Saruman and myself, since the kings failed, a scroll that Isildur made himself. Okay. So... Yeah. Why? One of the questions you guys were asking is, why is it that the scripts and tongues would have become dark to later men? I mean, yes, it's a 3,000-year-old text. He does not suggest that it is so worn and faded that it can no longer be read, right? Which, of course, is, possible enough, especially if manuscripts in the Gondorian archives are treated with even a fraction of the cavalier attitude with which ancient manuscripts were treated in Peter Jackson's film. Oh man, like the sort of general wailing of archivists as Gandalf is depicted with a beer in one hand and hoisting and shuffling manuscripts around, with next to the open flame. I mean, my goodness. Yeah, that was always one of those scenes that, but actually, I find it kind of illustrative, right? Illustrative of a very common mistake. Now, I'm not saying that Peter Jackson was necessarily mistaken about, like he didn't know about this, but clearly either the idea was rejected or never really thought through. This is a scroll that was written 3,000 years ago. What shape would that scroll be in now? What would a piece of parchment look like, feel like, act like 3,000 years after it was originally written on, right? And that's obviously not a question in which they were particularly interested. But I don't... I'm not saying we found a continuity error, in Peter Jackson's films. That's not the point. The point is that I think in general, and I've said this before, Lord of the Rings readers tend to, it's not that they don't know that 3,000 years have passed. It's that they tend not to think through what that means, right? How obscure knowledge would be. That was 3,000 years old, right? The gap in it's very natural for people. So again, it's one of the answers. It's one of the things I'm often reminding people of when people are asking questions like, well, then why didn't everybody know? Like, why, surely they've all heard the story. 3,000 years, man, 3,000 years have passed by. Now, For Thoughtless is wondering if it's possible that prior Gondorian lore masters recopied old scrolls for preservation. Certainly possible. Notice that Gandalf does not say that he thinks he's the only one other than Saruman to have read this scroll since Isildur wrote it. Right? He says, since the kings failed. And I do... JJ points out that 3,000 years ago is roughly the time of King David in Israel. Yeah, exactly. I mean, that's what we're talking about there. Anyway, so yeah, it's a long time ago, very long time ago. But I do think, when he says, since the kings failed, I think what he's pointing to there is, since Gondor began to wane, right? Archival preservation has probably gone downhill in the last 1,000 years. Lore has almost certainly gone downhill in the last 1,000 years. Anyway, but anyway, notice that very nothing about the condition of the scroll is mentioned here, right? Again, that would be a very plausible reason to believe that it would not be readable by many now, or readable only with very great difficulty. But that's not what he says. He says it's their scripts, and it's the scripts and tongues, right? Two reasons why. And this, of course, is not hard. On the one hand, this is not hard to believe, right? Obviously, languages do change a great deal in much less time than 3,000 years. And certainly Isildur would have been writing, I assume that Isildur would have been writing in Adunaic, which would still be known to lore masters. But again, what form of Adunaic would be best known to lore masters? You know, it's not to say that, yeah, I mean, just look at, for instance, the difference between, you know, Homeric Greek and New Testament Greek, for instance, right? To see another example of the rapid, relatively rapid, much more rapid than 3,000 years, changing of a language, which wouldn't necessarily, you know, which can make things difficult, right? If your New Testament Greek is pretty good, that doesn't mean Homer is going to be 100% transparent to you. Anyway, it is possible for Thoughtless that he recorded it in Elvish. It is possible. Whether in Sindarin or even possibly, you know, in Quenya. I would, for Thoughtless, we can't prove it, right? We don't know. He doesn't say what tongue it was written in. But I would actually speculate that it was Adunaic. If I had to put money on something, I would say Adunaic. And the reason I would say Adunaic is that I don't think he's making, he's intending this to be a public record. I think that this is, now he's not writing in Code Flamifer, but he's writing personally. He does say he's writing for posterity, but again, I don't think that he was intending this to be a general public record. It's not about writing in code. Adunaic would have been like English, right? I mean, take a medieval Englishman of the 14th century, right? Somebody in Chaucer's era, right? English is his native language. French, any educated person would be fluent in French, and any literate person would be fluent in Latin. So, like, you know, he could choose from any one of those languages. Which one would he choose, right? And the question is what it means. Like, I mean, and again, this is one of the, I mentioned Chaucer. This is one of the reasons why Chaucer's decision to write his poetry in English was a big deal, right? Because it meant something different. It meant something different that he was writing in English instead of writing. He could have written in French. He could have written in Latin, but instead he wrote in English. And for that reason, I think he's writing in Adunaic. Isildur, not Chaucer. I think he's writing in Adunaic because he's yeah. It does not read like a he says that it's for posterity. But yeah, I know, Tess, I'm glad to clear up the confusion. I know that many of you assumed I was talking about Chaucer writing in Adunaic. Yeah, now, anyway, so I believe it was in Adunaic. Well, we'll come back to that in the next slide. Yeah, no, there's no Adunaic copy of the Canterbury Tales that exists. Yeah, though that sounds like the kind of project that Tolkien would have really enjoyed. But anyway, that sounds like a challenge. Yeah. Yes, praise. That's exactly the kind of thing that I was thinking. He's writing more like a memoir for his children, not a record for the annals. It does not have the tone of a public declaration. It doesn't have the tone of like something that was meant to be carved somewhere, or reviewed by lore masters at annual conventions. It doesn't sound that way to me. It sounds like something he might have written in Adonaic. But anyway, Flammifer and a couple others had been saying, like, but why doesn't, like, wouldn't Denethor know Adonaic? First of all, why would you assume that? Why would you assume that? I don't necessarily assume that. It's easy to lose languages. They'd lost Greek in the Middle Ages until the Muslims taught it back to them, right? They didn't know Greek, even though they had records of only a couple hundred years ago of people who did know Greek and were translating from Greek to Latin. They'd lost it. They lost it in a couple hundred years. In English, in the early 1700s, late 1600s, 100 years. Well, by 300 years after Chaucer wrote, the language had changed such that they couldn't read his poetry anymore. Or rather, they could read it, but they thought it sucked. Because the pronunciation shift, the great vowel shift had happened, and they didn't know that. So they were trying to read Chaucer in modern pronunciation, their modern pronunciation, 18th century pronunciation, and they were like, this is embarrassing. Like, this guy can't scan a line to save his life, right? And yet here are all these writers whom we do respect talking about how awesome Chaucer was as a poet. So we're just going to kind of like not, we'll kind of do lip service to it and be like, yeah, Chaucer, yeah, well of English undefiled, that was him, right? And then it wasn't until the mid 18th century that somebody had the linguistic theory and was like, oh, dude, wait a second. If you pronounce the E's, it actually works really well. So people losing touch with a historical language totally happens all the time and way faster than this. But see, Flammifer, I don't agree. I mean, I don't think it's necessarily wrong, but I don't think we can assume that at all, that Denethor knows Adonaic because he has been cited as wise in the lore of Gondor, and much of the early lore must have been written in Adonaic. Must it? No, not necessarily. Quenya is the language of lore. When they were writing books of lore, they almost certainly wrote them in Elvish, right? Adonaic would have been the spoken language of the early Númenóreans, which was changing, therefore, most rapidly, and which would have fewer written records left from them, and certainly more of those written records would have been ephemera as well. Again, that's why so many of these languages get lost, and especially things like we don't know how Chaucer pronounced disease anymore, right? That happens especially when the language was primarily spoken. Now, that was like post-printing press that was lost, right? After the printing press, they still lost track of that. So again, so the language has changed into Westron, right? Which is just the current version of what Adonaic has become, and it has doubtless changed a good deal to and fro over the years. Yeah. Anyway, I do think that it's. Again, I'm not saying it's impossible. Like, do I think it's impossible that Denethor knows Adonaic? No, but I would not assume it. I would not at all assume it, especially since, remember, Boromir doesn't like to be reminded of this, but lore has been waning in Gondor, right? And again, to me, the parallel there, it's why I brought up Greek in the Middle Ages, right? Folks were really intelligent in the Middle Ages. There were some bright people in the Middle Ages, but they'd still lost Greek. They didn't know it, right? They didn't have anyone to teach it to them. And therefore, hundreds of years went by in which brilliant lore masters and scholars lived who didn't know how to read Greek, and therefore had only to rely upon the Latin translations of Greek stuff. Anyway, that's this is why I don't think it's at all a guarantee that even if it were written in Adunaic, it would be known. My point is simply, if Tolkien tells us this, like, if Gandalf asserts this, I don't see any reason to disbelieve it. I don't have any hard time believing that the combination of the two things, the script and the tongue, would make this scroll very, very difficult even for modern lore masters to read. Michael says, where's the Gondorian Rosetta Stone when you need it? Right, exactly. It's tricky. It's tricky. JJ says, how many people today can read cursive without aid? Hand a passage of cursive to one of my kids and you'll see them struggle. I've seen it, right? Yeah, and not to mention, like, look at 18th century print, and people have a hard time reading it. Not script, print, because of things like long S's and stuff, right? It looks weird. It's hard to read. But then go back to manuscripts written in a language you know perfectly well. Maybe you're good at Latin. Does that mean? But how's your paleography, right? Can you read the scripts? It's different, right? There lies in Minas Tirith still unread, I guess. Now he does say he's only guessing, right? He's not 100% sure that this has not been read, but he does have some circumstantial evidence that it's not been read since the kings failed, right? And that is the state of lore in Gondor. They don't know that Isildur took the ring, which they would certainly know if they'd read this. As Boromir himself has already attested, essentially. For Isildur did not march away straight from the war in Mordor, as some have told the tale. The thing that's one of the things that's interesting to me about Boromir's interruption here is that Boromir seems... Gandalf is clearly not addressing Boromir in that last sentence, I think. I don't doubt that Gandalf is perfectly familiar with the Gondorian citizenship test, right? I'm sure he knows that they know in Gondor that Isildur didn't go away, right? But what Boromir might possibly be forgetting is that he's not the only person in the room, right? There are many who have been there might even be some of the elves in the room who don't know that Isildur stayed, maybe in fact especially the elves, since the amount of time that Isildur stayed in the south was doubtless a blink, right, to the elves. So they didn't even notice that he wasn't there, right? He essentially came north right away, right? I mean, yeah, what did he wait? Like a decade? Right, as I said, he came north right away. But anyway, yeah. Oh, sorry, Emma Thorne. Paleography is the study of scripts. Like, so it's basically the study of reading manuscripts, medieval and ancient manuscripts. So you have to learn the languages, but then there's whole separate courses that you have to take, because there's like standard like abbreviations. I mean, when you're writing everything out, when you don't have a printing press, right? When you can't copy and paste and you've got no keyboard, you often use a lot of like shorthand things, essentially, when you're writing everything out by hand. So understanding how the scripts work, understanding the patterns of these shorthands and things, that's what paleography is, the ability to read manuscripts. Anyway, Okay, so yeah, Lincoln says, what does Lindir care what a particular sheep did before he came north anyway? Exactly. So Gandalf had just been segueing to say, Isildur did not march away straight from the war in Mordor, as some have told the tale, right? And I'm suspecting that it's the elves that he's talking to, because like Bilbo and Frodo would probably not have heard the tale at all, right? So I doubt they're, retelling scurrilous versions of what Isildur did after the war in the Shire, right? So I think it's the elves in the room that he's primarily addressing here. But yeah, I think he. But then Boromir immediately jumps on him here. By the way, for my money, this passage is where I've been a little bit of a Boromir apologist here, at least off and on, throughout this discussion over the last few months. And I think that when we look at it carefully, I think that Boromir comes across much better than he's often given credit for. I think that people are often a little hasty to dismiss Boromir when they read this passage, or this chapter, that is to say. But for my money, this is the passage where he comes across least well, honestly. I think this is not Boromir at his best. I'm not saying I can't understand it. I'm not saying I would have necessarily done better myself. I'm just saying Boromir looks really just grumpy here. And on his dignity and offended. His other interruptions, he's interrupted several times, right? He's definitely been the most frequent interrupter. Frodo's is second, but Boromir is first, as far as interruptions are concerned. Yeah. Corinne is calling me out for saying he comes across least well and not at his best. Okay, so badly? Well, yes, but not that badly is what I'm trying to say, Karina. I'm not saying I think he looks horrible. Again, I would probably be much ruder than Boromir was in his circumstance here. But the kind of... But I'm not comparing him to his moments on M1 Hannah. I just mean in the council praise. That's all I'm talking about there. Just in the council. This, I think, is Boromir's low watermark during the Council of Elrond, is my point. Him getting all like lectury as if he's correcting, trying to find something to correct Gandalf about because he's still miffed about it's the kind of thing that I think is a little bit, it's not a good look. Ambrosius Aurelianus says, Boromir feels as if the general state of lore among the steward's house is being maligned. He wants to show that, yes, they do know things about Isildur. Yes, exactly. I agree. That's why he gets all lectury here, right? In that time, he planted there the last sapling of the white tree in memory of his brother. Said almost as if he's presenting proof, right? He did, he stayed in the South. I can prove that he stayed in the South, and I can prove how I know he stayed in the South, right? But again, very, very defensive, right? But again, this strikes me as interesting. I agree with you, Ambrosius, that it does sound like he, it does sound like he is coming to the defense of the state of Gondorian lore. But what he's not obviously coming to the defense of is his father. That is, again, he's, don't you talk about my dad that way, is what he is not saying in anything like even an indirect way, I would say. That's interesting. Matt does point out we might want to cut Boromir a little bit of slack in thinking of Boromir as a prince here, right? He's used to being able to interrupt in a way that others might not. In this sense, it might be useful to parallel him with Pippin, who now and again tries to act high in the same way Boromir does. That's interesting. Yes. Yeah, possibly. I mean, that he would not... and also that he would have less of an idea than most of the other people sitting in the room, even Frodo, of like who Elrond is. I mean, he knows that Elrond is the wisest of lore masters. Okay, so that's kind of a big deal. But he's Boromir, right? I mean, he is like the prince. Yeah. Karita says, look, if Denethor was my dad, I probably wouldn't leap to his defense myself. It is possible that there is some element of acquiescence in Gandalf's accusations here. No question, Ambrosius, that book Denethor is better than movie Denethor. Movie Denethor is absurd. And I use that word carefully. I do find book Denethor to be a real weakness. I think that was seriously overplayed, and I don't mean by the actor. I mean by the script. But anyway, yeah. Still, nevertheless, I agree. The beacons alone. No, it's that Denethor is. It doesn't even make sense. I consider Denethor a fairly significant weakness in the film of The Return of the King, but there's I'm not saying there's no bits that are all interesting, but in general, I'm not a fan at all. Yeah, Mike says, remember that Boromir and Aragorn just had a moment a couple pages / months ago. And now Gandalf says, since the time of the kings, right? Since the kings failed, disparagingly. Yes. Yeah, exactly. It still seems to me the biggest trend. One of the main things we learn about Boromir so far, I think, just from the council, from, again, just book Boromir here, is if you really want to get Boromir's goat, insult Gondor, right? Make it sound like Gondor is slipping. Emphasize how much Gondor has come down in the world. And then you'll get him to start really being indiscreet. Right, because that seems to be what he really responds to here. Dime, I agree with you. I do think the actor who played Denethor did do a really good job with the lines he was given. That's why I don't blame the actor there. But yeah. Anyway. Okay. Gondor is Boromir's real dad. Karita, yeah, in some sense. So, Flamifer, you're re-asking the question that I was asking before, and I didn't answer it, so there's no reason not to re-ask it. Why is Gandalf antagonizing Boromir? Or at the very least, not going out of his way to... I mean, I'm not sure that antagonizing Boromir is his goal, right? Like, he's setting out to do that. But he's certainly not going too far out of his way, it would seem, to not to, right? Why? That's exactly why I keep asking the why question. Because I don't think it's just foolishness on Gandalf's part. He's just being thick, Gandalf is, right? Or being undiplomatic in a way that's really going to come back and bite him later on. I don't think so. Now, Lupilia, I agree that Gandalf says it as it is without sugarcoating. Yes, a distinct lack of sugarcoating. I 100% agree. But he doesn't have to. He could just follow the if you don't have anything nice to say, don't say anything at all policy here relatively easily, right? Long story short, found the scroll, right? So basically I'm kind of suspecting that O'Malley is asking if he could be testing him. I wonder, could he be pushing him? Gandalf, pushing Boromir a little bit on purpose. Would there be a reason for that, As Matt points out, Boromir has a lot of good qualities, but is strangely provincial for such an urbane figure. That is totally has tunnel vision as far as Gondor and Gondor alone is concerned, right? He does need some perspective on the world and the true state of Gondor. Maybe this comes back to your point, Lupilia. He could sugarcoat things. He could just remain tactfully silent, but instead he goes out of his way to say some non-sugarcoated things because it's important for Boromir to know, right? Okay, let's not do the whole Gondor can do no wrong thing, right? It totally can, and we need to make sure that, we're facing facts here. Yeah, exactly. For Thoughtless is saying if Gandalf is testing Boromir, that just moves the goalposts. To what end would he do so? Exactly. That's what I'm trying to think through, trying to work out. If there is there seemed to be an end in mind to Elrond's diplomacy earlier on, in his introduction of Aragorn especially, right? Let's break the whole potential future king thing in a little bit gently and keep the focus on the historical, in a sense. Mad Violinist is wondering if Gandalf could be testing the ground sort of for Aragorn's sake. How is this going to be received by Gondorian nobility? Possibly, though he doesn't. It's not really about the kingship thing that he's kind of pushing here. Could it be? Now, again, one thing that I keep in mind with Gandalf here, I'm pretty convinced that there are exactly two people who know almost exactly what's going to happen here, right? Who know that, Gandalf and Elrond, I think, are the two people who know all or almost all of the things that are going to be revealed in the council, right? They're the ones planning the revelations. They know that destroying the ring is the only real option, right? But they're and they know the only way to do that, right? So Gandalf knows a trip to Mordor, possibly one way there and not come back again, is the by far likeliest outcome of this council, right? Could he be doing the math and saying we're going to be returning into the general Gondor region? What are the odds that we leave this valley not accompanied by Boromir, right? We didn't know this, and he just showed up this morning. Right. So, we haven't been planning for this, but, I, Gandalf, am planning to go along on this mission. Right. So Boromir, I've got to figure this out. Right. JJ says, we know from the unexpected party that Gandalf has an odd way of selecting, testing, and introducing traveling companions. Yeah, he does. Exactly. Lupilia, you were thinking exactly the same thing. That if Gandalf is thinking it's going to go to Mordor, Boromir's path is going to be at least similar. Absolutely. So Boromir, they need to know, right? And Boromir needs to know, Creator, this comes back to what you were saying just a second ago. It's not guaranteed. He's not just trying to, get his goat, Boromir's goat, right? He's not just trying to elicit a particular reaction, right? Like, he's just trying to rile him up and then laugh at him. It does provide Boromir an opportunity. There are a number of opportunities Boromir has been provided today to see how he would take things, right? And he's responded well, sometimes less well in other places. But also, Matt, I can't help but remember your comment about Boromir's being a prince. And that's another thing that he might want to get over sooner rather than later, right? And this is where potentially pointed remarks about Denethor could come in particularly handy, right? Yeah, I know who your dad is. Let me give you just a touch of a glimpse of what I think of your dad, right? And how much awe I hold your dad in, right? So, and you're not Denethor, right? Yeah, I know. You're the son of the Lord of Minas Tirith, and in your little world, and your world is pretty little, Boromir, isn't it? In your little world, you are the big cheese, or the second biggest cheese in your entire world, right? Welcome to the bigger world, in which you're a minor character, actually, right? How do you handle that, Boromir? How does that make you? Tell me how that makes you feel, right? In some sense, I think that's. I don't know if I'd call him the penultimate cheese, Sam, but perhaps. Yeah. Lupilia says the Fellowship didn't come to beg any boon from Gondor. Yeah, true enough. And yes, Rowan, Boromir was in Minas Tirith when Gandalf found the scroll. Yeah. No, he would have been. Yeah. Wait, how old was Boromir then? This was a while back. When did Gandalf find the scroll? Hang on a second. I'm having a crisis. Gandalf's story, the modern part of Gandalf's story, begins with the party, Bilbo's party. Bilbo said, and things were done and said by somebody. Don't ask me what they were or what happened about Bilbo not having a hard time giving up the ring. He said, I opened my heart to Aragorn, and the two of us set off to seek. Right? So that was some time ago. Right? That was 17 years ago now. And they set off on the trail of Gollum. They were on the trail of Gollum for some time, right? Okay. So the appendix says, okay, so the reconstructed dates say 3017, he read it. Okay. Interesting. Sorry, in a sense, I'm playing the same game that Tolkien played a lot, which was the reconciling of dates. He loved this game, and he was very careful about it. But don't forget Tolkien's general approach to this kind of thing. When there were issues, Tolkien did not prefer to go back and change things to make it work. Instead, he preferred to make up a story about how it could possibly have come to be that way, right? So, okay. We're told in the beginning of chapter 2, it must be during the 9-year gap, right? Must have been the time that, so, because he didn't say anything. Neither he nor Aragorn said how long it was that they were searching. Multiple years? 9 years? Is that what he was doing during that 9-year absence? When Frodo didn't see him for 9 years, right? If so, the account back at the beginning of chapter 2 about Frodo seeing Gandalf and not seeing him and seeing him every once in a while doesn't really jive with what Gandalf is saying or what he was suggesting, right? Do you see what I mean? Do you see what I mean? We're told in the beginning of chapter 2 that Frodo saw him occasionally, and then there was a 9-year period. And then at the end of the 9-year period, Gandalf shows up all of a sudden, and Frodo had thought that he'd lost all interest in hobbits, right? If this Gondorian research project happened at the very end of his search for Gollum, and the Gondorian research project came right before, and he leaves from Minas Tirith to go to Bag End and chuck Frodo's ring into the fire. Right? If that's the sequence, which would mean it would be in that 9-year gap, then he couldn't have left with Aragorn right away, as we were believing, right? I opened my heart to Aragorn 7 years later, after I got alarmed by Bilbo's departure. See what I mean? I'm not saying I think it's necessary that he opened his heart to Aragorn in 3001, right? Right after the party. I'm saying it sounded like that when he told the story just now. Yeah. Yes, Dollarstruck, you do have to remember how long it takes people to travel. In the pre-modern world. Absolutely. And that is why very few people did, or why it was a very big commitment to do so. And why it's so surprising to read in the Middle Ages about how often people went on pilgrimages to Jerusalem, for instance. It's a very big commitment of time to do that. Anyway. Yeah, no, Rowan, I agree. Once he found the scroll, he returned to the Shire. That link seems clear, right? So, anyway, I'm just saying it's not at all transparent to me what he did between, if the 9-year gap is the hunt for Gollum. Hey, seriously? 9 years? They were hanging out, what, in Ithilien for 9 years? Looking for Gollum? Maybe it took them a couple years to get there. Right, but that's a lot. That's a lot. Yeah. Anyway, but what he was, if that's true, even if that's true, that he was spending 9 years doing that, what he did for the first 7 years is not clear. Exactly. Anyway. Sorry. Just speculating. Okay. Okay. Maybe 2 slides was a little ambitious today. All right. Should we read it? Okay, let's read it. The great ring shall go now to be an heirloom of the North Kingdom, but records of it shall be left in Gondor, where also dwell the heirs of Elendil, lest a time come when the memory of these great matters shall grow dim. Okay. Let's stop there. Let's just talk about that bit and then we'll be done. Yeah, I know, Ambrosius. This is a slippery slope, right? Okay. First of all, here's another reason why I suspect that this was why this was written in Adonaic. He says, records of it shall be left in Gondor, lest a time come when the... He doesn't say that this thing that he's writing is one of them. This is not necessary. He doesn't say like, and thus have I written out this decree, so that, or not decree, but thus have I written out this record, lest a time come when the... He says, records of it shall be left. Records, plural, shall be left, right? I'm going to leave records that I'm going to speak of in the, in the third person, right? This sounds like a diary entry that he wrote describing his intention that records should be left in Gondor, right? So I don't think that this proves that this thing that Gandalf was reading was a record that he meant to leave as a public record. I think it is a record of his intention. It's a diary entry of his intention to leave those records. Angrist says, wait, other records? Where are they? Good question. My suspicion? I don't think he wrote them. I don't think he did it. I think that Isildur intended that records should be left in Gondor, lest a time come when the memory of these great matters shall grow dim. But I don't think he did it. I think that's why this lore was forgotten in Gondor. Otherwise, it would be on the Gondorian citizenship test, just like the question about Meneldil's instruction, right? Exactly, Drakon Tarakni. I think that this is evidence that Isildur never got around to acting on that intention. So Lord Byron, absolutely correct. I take this as evidence of the ring's influence on him. He meant to. He saw that it was a good idea that records, plural, should be left. But he didn't do it. They weren't left. And not because he was prevented. He could have done. Easily could have done. Now it's possible that he did, and they got lost. Things do get lost in 3,000 years. Goodness knows, right? But I think it's also very likely that the ring itself prevented him. Keeping it to yourself, not drawing other people's attention to it, seems like to fit the pattern that we have seen from the ring, right? What's more, hang on, I lost my train of thought. I was going to say something else. What's more, it's consistent with other ring suggestions. Never mind. Don't remember. Oh well, I lost it. Something about where also dwell the heirs of Elendil. Yes, that's it. Where also dwell the heirs of Elendil. If he left a record saying, this shall go to be an heirloom of the North Kingdom, but records of it shall be left in Gondor, where also dwell the heirs of Elendil, who might therefore lay claim to it, right? He's talking about the ring like it's should be a public thing, right? Not just publicly known, as it would be if he left records for the heirs of Elendil, but also like it's, I think I saw somebody earlier on talking about the crown jewels. That's kind of how he's talking about it here, right? Yeah. Now, good. Wolfhound says that as a descendant of the Númenóreans, he would appreciate the need to preserve knowledge from olden days as compared to your average schlub. He sure would. He would be keenly aware of, what can happen. You never know. You never know when your city is going to sink beneath the ocean, right? It happens. So, yeah, you got to be careful about record preservation. Yeah, Fourth Dauntless says it sounds like the loss of the ring was pretty providential. Can you imagine the North and South Kingdoms in wars over ownership of the ring? Oh, yes, I can imagine that. Yeah, Mike thinks he totally left the records in an envelope on the mantle on the way out. I doubt he did, Mike. But I bet if Gandalf had come in at that moment and asked him, where are the records of the ring that you're going to leave in Gondor, he would have told him that it was on the mantelpiece, right? Only to discover that it was actually in his pocket, right? Yeah. Absolutely. Matt is asking, what do we make of Isildur calling it the Great Ring rather than the One Ring or something else? I think it makes sense that he calls it the Great Ring. It tells me that he, Isildur, primarily think, and presumably therefore, that I don't necessarily take as a ring influence thing. That seems to me a cultural thing. That is, if you grew up in, Middle Earth at that time, at the end of the Second Age, right? You would primarily associate Sauron's Ring of Power not with its singularity, but with its power, right? It is the ring to rule them all. That's what's yes, there's only one of them, but that's not the most important thing about it. The most important thing is that it is the Great Ring. There are the lesser rings, there are the great rings, and then there's the Great Ring, right? That can rule all of the others. Fourth Dauntless says they still call this category of objects great rings. Yes, the Wise now does. But did they in the Second Age? See, I think that's one of the things that would, some of the vocabulary that would likely change. To Third Age scholars, the chief importance is the difference between the lesser rings and the great rings. Why? Because what Third Age scholars are primarily interested in is leftover rings that might turn up places like troll caves or random tunnels or dragon hoards, right? So the interest of the practicing scholar of the Third Age, the interest in the rings would be to categorize them. So there were the great rings, which are perilous for mortals, and then there are the lesser rings, which are probably still not a good idea, but, downgraded in the peril department, right? So for them to use the term great ring categorically in that way makes sense, and it fits their context, right? Not so Isildur in the Second Age. In the Second Age, there would be two primary categories of rings. There would be the rings that the good guys have, and there would be the great ring that Sauron has, right? That's what really matters most, I would say. So yeah, I would say that it's important, but I don't think it's ring influence. I think it shows that this is how he, presumably his dad, Gil-galad, all of them, would have spoken of the Great Ring, of Sauron's ring. Sauron's ring is the Great Ring, the ring that dominates the rest of them. I see. Ambrosius Aurelianus was suggesting that the actual records that Isildur left behind were behind a paywall, and Gandalf did not subscribe, so that makes good sense. Dolerstroke asked, did they know that Sauron's ring dominated the elven rings at that point? Yes, they definitely did. They knew that through Celebrimbor. Absolutely, they knew that. Remember, there are wielders of elven rings who would know that full well. What Sauron's ring, the Great Ring, was for. And remember, they're closer to the forging of the rings, knowing, right, that the forging of all the rings, even those which are called by Third Age scholars great rings, right, like dwarf rings and elf rings, there's the whole Ring of Power project, and then there's the Great Ring that Sauron was planning to spring on them all along, right, in order to spring the trap that he was laying for them by the whole Ring of Power thing in the first place. So again, they were closer to that. And so, again, all of them calling it the Great Ring would make a lot of sense to me. Whereas again, once we're categorizing, right, so we've got great rings and we've got lesser rings. And of course, you can distinguish the great rings by their number, right? We had, the 3 and the 7 and the 9 and the 1, right? And so we Third Age scholars call it the One Ring. But that, I think, would not indicate its importance sufficiently to Isildur. Okay. But no, they wouldn't have known the negative effects. No one would have had any idea of the effects of anybody wielding the One Ring or carrying the One Ring or laying claim to the One Ring, because no one's ever had it other than Sauron. So yeah, no question, they would not have known the effects on a mortal wielder of the Great Ring. Definitely. The last observation I'll make, and then we'll do our field trip. Last observation on Isildur's opening there. There's a word missing, right, in that first paragraph. Not missing in the sense that there's like a syntactic gap or something like that, but there's a word he doesn't use in that first paragraph that I find kind of interesting. Especially interesting because he uses it a lot in the rest of the paragraph, right? The next paragraph. And it's I. Yeah, Fourth Dauntless is guessing at the same time exactly. I. He speaks in the third person all the way through. The Great Ring shall go now to be an heirloom of the North Kingdom. He's not saying the Great Ring is mine, my own. He's not saying that. The Great Ring shall go now to be an heirloom of the North Kingdom. But records of it shall be left, passive voice, in Gondor, where also dwell the heirs of Elendil, lest a time come when the memory of these great matters shall grow dim. I'm not sure what to make of it. He is laying claim to it. The whole heirloom of the North Kingdom thing is him laying claim to it, but he's being indirect, right? We could potentially see this as an argument against the ring having much influence on him, but I think we'll see fairly obvious evidence that it is, right? He's going to drop the P word in the next paragraph, so I think it's pretty clear that and that's not the P word, by the way, that the ring is influencing him, right? So I don't think we can see it as counter evidence. I mean, maybe we could say it's evidence that he's not too far gone, right? Interesting. Matt says the first part reads like the official passage and the second part reads like the commentary. Yeah, almost. I mean, it's or like a preamble and then the primary text, right? Yeah, I think in the end, that's how I would interpret it. I would interpret his not using not using the first person, and his using the passive voice. Not as an attempt to hide anything, but as a kind of formality, right? Here's what's going to happen, and then I'm going to do it. Right? Anyway, okay. But I'm not going to get drawn in too much further. We'll come back to this, and we'll talk about the rest of this passage next time. Good thing this isn't one of those times, like I said, that will be coming up soon where I'm going to have to miss class, because that would be a cliffhanger. But anyway, okay. Let's... Oh, wait, sorry. One last comment that I don't want to lose. Autoflagellator on Twitch was saying that the shift from the Great Ring to the One Ring is actually, it's almost like the way that the Great War became World War One. Yeah, that is actually a really interesting comparison. Now, again, it's because the Second World War came along, right? And so it became no longer the Great War because a greater war came soon. But still, it does have that sense, right? It's not for the same reasons, but it is interesting. Yeah, good. Okay. With that, I'm going to end my book discussion tonight, and we'll go on to the field trip. Thank you, everybody, for joining me. I'm going to say goodnight to the folks on Twitter and in the town, and we're going to switch over to Twitch only, well, and Discord also, of course. But if you wanted to join us for the field trip on twitch.tv/SignumU, you would be welcome to do so, as we're going to be continuing our explorations of Angmar. So, awesome. So thanks, Twitter people. See you guys next time.
All right. Good evening, sir.
Good evening. Here, let me put my earpiece in here. All right.
All right. So, Gorothlad again.
All right. And let me expand here. Okay. Off to Angmar.
All right.
Let's meet at Gorothlad again.
All right. Yeah, we're getting into the lore within the lore. So.
Yes. Yeah. Really fun stuff.
All right. Let me put up the beacon. There we go. Okay.
Yeah, multiple beacons.
Yep, just for fun.
Multiple
and to get
beacons
them out
in
of my
Signum
inventory.
colors. That's pretty good, yeah. That's excellent.
Yeah.
In the Signum University, red and gold. That's good. All right.
That was totally intentional. And not because they were listed in chromatic order in my inventory.
Excellent. All right.
That's right. The beacons are lit. Narnian calls for A. That's right.
It. That's it. Okay. Are we ready? I know that it's always dark in Angmar, but I feel like, it's always dark, but it's not always night. Like, why is it always the middle of the night when we're doing our field trips? We haven't had a daytime, and it's midnight too.
Yeah. It's because we always start the field trip in between 11:45 to 12:15, right. And within that time period is mostly dark.
Yeah.
This is advanced darkness, though.
Well. I guess we'd have to change the schedule too.
Yeah.
I guess I didn't really ever put together that it was the same time of day in Lotro, every day at the same time. I knew it cycled around, but I didn't realize that the cycle in that sense matched the real world cycle.
No, I think it's 12 hours is 1 hour, and then the other 12 hours is 1 hour. It's not like Animal Crossing that's in real time or something.
Right, no. I know it's not in real time, but I mean...
the fact that we keep coming back at the same time, it will be at the same time.
Yes. Yeah.
Yeah,
Though a different
at least
number
on
of days
Tuesdays.
have passed and everything, yeah.
Yeah, I don't know if it alternates at all, but I don't think so if it's even an hour numbers or something.
Yeah. I don't know. I mean, maybe it doesn't, but it just, if not, then it seems like an awful coincidence that we always seem to be. Why can't we get a nice sunny day in Angmar? Is that too much to ask?
Right. They have lots of those in Angmar.
Yeah, exactly.
You're in the wrong season. This isn't the beach season for Angmar.
Right, exactly. JJ says now he wants Animal Crossing Angmar edition.
Come on over. I got the Witch King of Angmar, and it's his birthday. Did you bring a present? I'm bringing fruit wrapped in brown paper. Actually, it was Roscoe's birthday today in Animal Crossing. Don't ask me why I know that.
Okay.
It's because it's the one thing I can control in my life.
There you go. Well, I have not played Animal Crossing, so.
It's addictive. You never get anything done.
I know of it, but I have not played it.
It's kind of zen. It's like your little zen garden.
Right?
Yeah,
Okay.
It really is. Tantric boredom.
Ah, okay. Oh, it lightened up. That's better than when it darkened last week at this point.
We were under the umbrella of Karn Doom, I believe, under there.
Okay. Still
I think
dark,
that's what it
but
was. Yeah, we're still getting that advanced darkness pretty far ahead.
yeah.
I think it'll lighten up a bit when we get to the Sulphur Lakes, which is kind of where we're heading. I think you're heading back towards the...
Vague direction. Yeah, so
Yeah.
we kind of finished Barad Gularan last time in as much as we could. So I wanted to head back towards that southeastern portion. So if we're
Yes.
headed due south from here down to Gorothlad, basically.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, and there's that probably White Hand banner.
Yep.
Oh,
Yeah,
wait,
that's the one
are we
for
back
the-
Minas to-
Yeah, we're back. Yeah, we
we're
went back to
Yeah,
Barad
we don't go
Gularan.
back.
Yeah.
Okay, right. So I totally failed to not go here.
Okay. We just followed the road back. That's cool.
Yeah, I guess we'll just follow the road back. I was not following the road that. Yeah, I could go straight south from here. Except, can you go straight south from here?
We could loop it around. We could loop it around, maybe.
Yeah,
I don't know.
not confident in my ability to go south from here. That's all right. I'm just gonna. Yeah, shortcuts make long delays. That is certainly my experience in the greater Barad Gularan region. No question.
There's a lot of cliffs to make long delays out here.
Yeah. So let's cut through Imlad Balchorth instead.
Okay.
At least that was my original plan, and then I made a wrong turn. So.
I'm one of those people where it's like I can go places or I can look at the map. I can't do both at the same time.
Yeah.
You ever wonder how we got around places before GPS, honestly?
Right. Oh, yeah, this was my problem. Is I went down. I was looking for the right-hand turn after this point, and clearly it's well before this point.
Well, the problem is just a lot of roads that don't look like roads, and there's a lot of non-roads that do look like roads.
Yes.
Just because of all the naked patches of ground.
Okay, that's the road I was looking for.
Yeah, that's a big old arch.
Yeah. There we go. Okay.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, see, we're getting closer to Karn Dune, so we got that big force field over us
We
again.
got back into the green lights.
The blight.
Yeah.
The desolation.
Oh, well. Okay, and now we're down into the like grayish blue glow of the dead down here.
Yep. And getting memories of the Barrow Downs at night here. Or Farnost.
Yeah.
Oh, we got some Angmar guys back.
All right, those are the messengers, right?
That's right. Yep.
Okay. All right, this is just where I wanted to go. And so then after we join the other road again, we then we leave it and strike out for the south.
South. Le Sur. Okay, got it.
That's the plan. Okay. So
All right.
yeah. All right, let's cross
For the Bridge of Death.
Yeah. A nice view of the land of the dead. Actually, it's obscured by trees.
It's great when you can't see all the dead stuff.
Yeah.
That's the photo they use in the Realty listing.
Right. Okay, now here's where I want to cut south.
Yeah, yeah, here we go.
Down into Malinhad. Okay.
Oh, look at all these big salt deposits everywhere.
Yeah, which, you know, certainly would seem to support our theory that this was a sea, but like an inland sea before.
Mm-hmm.
Right.
Or a natural salt lake.
Right. Okay.
Just sort of boiled up and dried out.
And we immediately discover a wagon.
Yep.
What is wrong with that wagon?
It's huge.
Yeah, but what's with the dents on the side?
Oh, yeah, that's a thing. I think whatever's in there did not want to be in there.
And there's another one over here. They don't seem to be on the inside, but, you know, that might be a rendering issue. Oh, look, and there's some bumps on the top, too. Yeah, I think this was used to transport something violent.
Like a metal bender.
Yeah.
Sorry, I'm watching Avatar, Your Last Airbender again. Yeah, I'm going to say it's one of those big ogre-y, troll-y looking things.
Yeah, presumably so.
That are always called something that's not ogre or troll.
Troll transports, yeah.
Yep.
Gotta be.
Troll Uber.
Okay, now this banner.
Oh, yep. Seen this guy.
We have. The color is not really a blood red, more of a fiery red color, but it's dripping like blood. It's just the crown-eye combination thing. No hand here, right?
You could see it was probably once white, and now it's just
the
really
banner
nasty.
itself, yeah.
Yeah.
Yes. Crown ghouls on field dingy, basically, is what we get here. Kind of dingy, grimy. Yeah.
Le Guam. And we see the wolves on the supports on the side, like we've seen throughout the Shire and all the other and Eredmu and all the other
a bunch of
encampments
those.
we've seen.
Yeah. So this looks like an orc goblin camp, definitely.
Yep. Gotta say the wolves are better defined on this one.
Yeah. Okay, we get a bunch of trolls here.
That might have been what was in the wagon.
Yeah. How interesting that they would need to transport them by wagon. And this is a siege tower?
Yeah, these are the ones they were setting up near
down in the south down there, right?
Yeah, from the passage from Estelden to Angmar.
Yeah. Okay. Was that troll called a lasher?
Yes.
This guy's a thrasher. Are there other?
John Olog Thrasher.
Okay, the thrashers here.
Is it Yarn?
I guess they could thrash enemies.
Thrash and thrash.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's like these guys are big, but they don't look like the size of something that would bend the metal box we saw.
Yeah.
I think that's more like the giant beasties that we saw, like, coming out of Carndum.
Right, maybe. Okay, lots of siege equipment, but look over here. Monoliths with a table on top.
Oh, una mesa.
Look at that.
Yeah, that is, The giant's table.
Who made
That looks like some of the giant stuff that we've seen in Misty Mountains.
Like in the Misty Mountains?
The giant settlements, yeah.
Yeah. So were there giants then living here? That's a new angle that we've not seen anywhere in Angmar before.
No, we haven't. Some sort of crashed wagon over there.
Look, and here's more. This whole gateway thing.
Yeah, it looks so much like the stone tables we see in Misty Mountains and later on in Enedwaith.
Yeah.
Is it Enedwaith?
This. So, would this have been what?
Whoa.
A little, like this whole, would this have been like a little giant's house?
Maybe. Maybe they're shoring up supports, but it's freestanding.
Yeah. It is freestanding, and
looks like they're trying to transport stuff on top, but it's not connected to anything.
Would the giants that we see in the Misty Mountains fit through here?
Yeah, they sort of huddled in them like it was like shelter, or a windbreak.
Yeah, maybe he thought it was a very cunning entry, that made it very small and secret.
Mm-hmm. Or maybe it was what's the word? Just most of them were up against the cliff face, though. A lot of the only freestanding ones were the ones that had pathways above them between two rocks.
Yeah.
Like, look at all these crashed wagons everywhere. Oh no, it's got a rock on it. That's a crashed wagon.
And another one over here.
Yep.
But we're only seeing these table things.
Oh, this is gross. Yeah.
No evidence of anything else.
No.
Any other structures, or unless I'm just missing it?
I don't know. This water is so gross looking.
Yes, it is. Okay, hang on. What's over here? This is the other entrance, right?
Yes.
So we see another goblin entrance.
Guys asleep on watch duty.
Who the orcs were?
Oh, I've got a Rurike down there. Nobody kill this guy. He's kind of cool. This little chieftain sitting out here.
Right.
And that starts that quest where you have to get all the swords of the chieftains.
Is he one of the good guys? One of the Trev Galorg?
No, because you can target on him. I think the idea is you kill all the bad guys and take all of their ancient swords, and then you bring it to this place,
right,
east of here.
But he's one of the Trev. So he's one of the Trev Duverdine then.
I don't know. It just says Rurike on it.
I mean, he's got the hat.
Yeah, he does.
He's got the hat, and with the, what we have been calling the orange slices. You can see them spread out over his hat with the, if you looked at his hat and profile, it would look like one of those dangly orange slices.
Or it looked like a Roman helmet.
Yeah. Okay.
Intriguing. I wonder if we kill him, we get more info. I don't have that quest.
Do you normally? Does he aggro on you? Yes.
Well, yeah.
I'm going with yes. Okay.
The answer is yes.
And he
okay.
Throws. Okay, I thought he was throwing sticks, not throwing axes.
All right.
Okay. That's good. And the cloak was made of fur. Okay.
Yeah.
Interesting. Okay. So there's just random Trev Duverdine running around.
With the equivalent of the 7 swords of Wayland or something.
Right. Okay, I'm going to continue up in this way. Because, I did see more giantish construction up here. I'm looking for something other than tables.
Trolls. Yeah. Oh, these are all just cave claws. Oh, this is the wilds out here.
Oh, and here's another one. Owen. What are they comparing the Trev Duverdine to the Welsh?
Huh. Yeah, that's a pretty Welsh name right there.
That's a very distinctive name, yeah.
I think if you'd spelled it with an A and an I is the only way it would be more Welsh.
Right.
Owain.
Okay.
So, yeah, now I'm wondering what the other ones are named and if they have Welsh names. What was the first one?
No, it was
Rurich.
Rudijk. Yeah, it did not.
It doesn't quite sound like a Welsh name.
Nope.
Especially since the elves are supposed to be the ones with the Welsh culture. I don't know.
Yeah. Sorry, I'm looking around for any evidence of any other megaliths or giantish constructions.
There's a something.
What, down here in the
No, this big glowing red thing here.
glowing
Oh,
red?
that's another statue. That's another statue. That's what it is. Almost
Wait,
due east.
Did I? Oh, that one over there? Yeah.
Yeah. Sorry, it looked like the whole building was lit up. From back here.
And where are we? This is... Okay, we've gone around there. All right.
Whoa! Big AoE. Back up, guys. Back up.
Okay, we've got another one of the statues, another one of the old Angmarim fortifications. So this is the... Wow, boy, lots of dread here.
Lots of elite.
Yeah.
I think what is this, the Rift? No, we're not at the Rift.
No, this is not
Just
the Rift.
at Method. We're at Method. Whoop, backing up. Getting the eye.
Yeah, this is the... I remember this is like the fellowship area in here.
Yeah, I don't think I've ever seen this. I never had anybody go with me.
Now, I remember stumbling into this before, but I want to go back around. I want to go back around to...
Yeah.
First of all, where I can see, and second of all, where was that little campsite that I was just going to? It was somewhere near this
What?
warg. There he is.
Oh. Not a campsite.
Orc camp.
Oh, orc camp.
They're excited.
Yeah, well, now we're back to stick and skin construction.
Yeah, exactly. And that's just a wood pile. Okay.
That's actually sensible for these guys. Although these look like post holes for building more structures.
Yeah. Yeah, more piled up over here. Okay.
Yeah.
All right, yeah, so I wanted to look around these wilds to see if there was anything here. So where am I now? I'm down in the south now. Okay.
I know there's a pretty big cliff coming up. So
I wanted to see if there is any more evidence of giants. That's what I'm looking for. Any more megaliths, any more... Aha, there's the valley.
Yep, there's the valley. That's one of them. There's a couple.
Yeah.
One of them has an old structure in it, though. Look, see, they got the big piles of wood down there, too.
Okay. Yeah, see, I'm
And
looking
another chieftain, whose name is
boulders and
Huisdan. Huisdan?
Wistan?
Huisdan.
Wistan.
Yeah.
Nope, no evidence. I was hoping up at the top of the hill there would be like a standing stone maybe, or a...
No, not seeing anything.
No?
What's over there? Oh, big cliff. That's what's over there.
Yeah.
I thought there were some ruins out. Oh, there it is. See that tower right? See
Wait.
where I'm pointing? There's a brick tower through the trees.
There's a brick tower through the trees?
Yeah.
Is that where I seem to have the secret of the swords quest.
Oh.
So my quest arrow seems to be pointing in that direction.
Oh,
Oh, I
serendipity.
think I'm about to fall. Nope. Maybe. Sliding down the hill? Okay. Covered.
I'm gonna follow you then since you got that arrow. Yeah, there we go.
Yeah.
And I broke so many ankles out here first time I was out here.
Yeah, so this is all... Yeah. Okay. So here's the entrance to the valley. The non-ankle breaking version.
Mm-hmm.
This.
Oh, you're gorgeous.
Oh my goodness. Look at that. No wonder it looks so different. It's a Dunadines structure.
Yep.
The only one of its kind we have found anywhere in Angmar.
Uh-huh.
And there's the 7 stars and the scepter of Illuminus.
Yep.
Just as bold as you please.
Wait, have we seen these guys intact before? With the orb and the sword? I feel like we've only seen them, like, busted up.
So we have these, like, you know, foot lockers, right, at their feet.
That's where you put the swords.
Right, with
See, there's
the
a little sword holder.
Yeah, with the Numenorean sigils there.
Uh-huh.
These guys are not in great shape, though.
No. Oh, this one's got some scorch marks on it.
Yeah. Have their faces been effaced?
Looks like it's just weathered.
Yeah.
Like these guys have been here for a long time. Let's face it, they have been probably.
Yeah. Pretty sure I never completed this quest.
Do you have any dialogue with Denethor over here?
Oh yeah.
How can I be of service?
Sure do.
What's he say?
He's a ranger, right?
I think so. He's dressed like
Looks
a ranger.
fairly rangery. Alright, might as well see what he has to say. Well met. I have tarried here long seeking to unravel a mystery from times past. Perhaps you can help me. Well, that's kind of what we do.
That's our thing.
Yeah, Banfuir at least believes you to have some skill, else he would not have sent you. Okay, I don't remember who he was, but that's okay. Look
Oh, right, him.
Naturally, right. We're close. We're close. Okay, look upon the 7 statues behind me. Doubtless you note that they are each missing the sword which they once held. Okay, no, they're each holding a sword, but there's a place on their footlockers where there could be swords. So,
Yes.
this place is one of ancient evil. Fascinating.
Huh.
Something I have long studied, and I know too well the scars that have been left in its wake. Huh. This loathsome place, it really doesn't look loathsome.
Doesn't feel loathsome either.
This
I
is
mean,
like
we got the
at the bottom of the loathsome, like if I made a list of places in Angmar and I ranked them in terms of their loathsomeness, this would be really pretty close to the bottom of my list.
But he's a ranger. He doesn't like seeing this stuff in bad places.
I guess not.
Maybe is this Black Numenorean stuff then?
All right, maybe where the doom of the North Kingdom was wrought, but I will speak... What? Maybe where the doom of the North Kingdoms was wrought?
Ouchies.
Huh.
Say more words now.
Huh.
Ugh.
So, Matt says the swords are all of leaders corrupted by the Witch King.
Oh, cool.
Okay.
I like that.
Yeah. So the doom was wrought here, not in the sense that it fell here, like Fornost was really where where it happened, but
So is there black magic here, or is it just like a reminder of bad things?
I don't know,
There's
but
no,
like I say, it's... And
there's no atmospheric ickiness. It's not like most places in Angmar where you feel bad here.
Right. It didn't give me any further quest. I guess I'd get the quest if I go back to Owen and kill him. Then it gives me the quest or something.
Yeah, because you got to start collecting the swords.
Right. I might have to do that now.
Yeah, do it, Matt. Do it. Then we got to go through the doors and figure out what's in the doors.
Right. Now I was let's see, JJ was pointing out the round tower. I was looking at that too. The stone on that round tower at the center does not look the same. I mean, having the round tower inside the square tower is a little bit odd to begin with. But,
yeah, that is. Looks like it was bricked up too, like there
Edith,
used
that
to
was
be
a good
windows
suggestion.
up there.
Edith was urging me to look in my bag to make sure I didn't get a quest item or something, but I did not.
Yeah.
Huh. Yeah, no, I think I'm going to have to do the sword quest now. Lexicon, I'm way too curious about this now, especially since Grifflet kind of whipped through Angmar, so...
Yeah.
Grifflet's past Angmar and not coming back, so this is going to be my only opportunity. So what do you have to... You just have to go around and kill the... Kill the
chieftains
kill the
holding the
chieftains?
sword. They're
Okay.
all around the sulfur pits. Some of them closer, some of them in the wild, some of them in the camps with the enemies. All the enemies camps around the sulfur pits.
I'll tell you what, next week we'll fellow up. Because if you're fellowed up and somebody kills them, then you get credit for it, right?
Oh yeah.
Yeah. So next week we'll make a big old fellowship and we'll go hunting for the 7 dudes. So that we can try to find the 7 swords from the 7 dudes.
The dude swords.
Yeah, and then we'll see what happens. Do we get to go inside the tower?
I think so. Yeah, there's like a dread thing, dreadfulness.
Well, maybe I can find out what's so very loathsome about this place, because I'm telling you, this looks nice.
Yeah. Wouldn't want to build a summer home here.
I don't know. I mean, again, compared to other places in Angmar, like this would be really high on my summer home list, you know.
Yeah, I mean, it's also like there's hardly any beasties around here either. It's
exactly. It's quiet, it's sheltered, it's out of the wind, you know, it's like
this is
not got any of the unquiet dead.
Yeah.
Okay.
No dread hanging over it.
No dread.
I mean, we still got the bubble. We're still under the bubble on this one, but
yeah, sure. The sky doesn't look great, but okay. All right, so we'll next time we'll get the swords. That'll also help us to finish exploring around and seeing if we see any other evidence of giants, which I'll also be keeping an eye out for.
We'll get to look at all the enemy camps stationed around the sulfur pits.
Yes. Okay. Good. JJ says there were giants where we were last week. What, up by Barad Gularan?
Yeah, I think they have their own tower.
Do they?
All the enemies have their own towers in Barad
Giants
Gularan.
have their own tower.
Maybe those big, ugly, giant things?
I had forgotten that.
Yeah, but we only got to like 3 towers.
Okay. Interesting. But those are clearly, well, I guess you could say maybe they're not. I was assuming they were ancient, but maybe they only looked ancient and are merely crude, built by modern giants. I suppose it's possible.
Maybe.
Okay. All right. Anyway, okay. So we're going to sign off this week. But next week, we will do the Quest of the Swords. I think this will be Narnian's, like, other than the epic chain to get past the statues, this will be the first quest he's ever accomplished in his life. It'd be an exciting moment. Anyway, so we'll do the Quest of the 7 Swords and then get in there, because now I need to see the inside of this tower, obviously, especially if I'm to draw any conclusions about the difference between the stone in the square and the round tower. So, you know, if I can get in it, I got to get in it. That's the story. So, okay. Very good.
All right.
Thank you, everybody, for joining us. And we will see you next week for the Quest of the 7 Swords. Very good.
Yeah.
Thanks, everybody. Thanks for joining me on this epic exploration of The Lord of the Rings, and of Standing Stone's video adaptation of Tolkien's story. If you are having even half the fun I'm having on this journey, I hope you will consider supporting the project by donating at signumuniversity.org/fund.